Hello, welcome to your community mental health hosted by NAMI Miami-Dade. I'm Susan Racher, volunteer board president of NAMI Miami. We are a peer-to-peer organization, your local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the largest grassroots organization for mental health in the US. What is peer-to-peer? It means that all of our programs are produced, delivered, presented, and managed by individuals who have lived experience with mental health challenges and are trained to a national NAMI standard. I am the mother of a young man who experienced serious mental illness in college and became involved in NAMI as a result. And I can tell you that our commitment to education and awareness and giving you the tools that you need to navigate any mental health challenge is an important mission and something that all of our viewers should consider learning about, building their educational resources before they need it. Before they need it. Unfortunately, I didn't have that knowledge before I needed it and had to gain it rather quickly under very challenging circumstances, which we did as a family. Our program on community news is aimed to give you the tools, the resources to know when you need help, to know where to find help, to know and meet members of the community who are dedicated to helping with mental wellness for you, your family, your staff, your loved ones, and your friends. Today, we are talking about a very important topic, suicide education and awareness, with a particular focus on a population that is extremely vulnerable to suicide ideation, the LGBTQ community. This conversation would be really important any time of the year, but June is Pride Month. And in honor of those who stepped out of their comfort zone to improve and open the conversation on LGBTQ rights and awareness, we address that topic today as well. Pride Month was signed by President Bill Clinton, but it was preceded by an uprising that really changed the conversation and showed everyone the impact of positive activism on improving society for everyone. NAMI Miami, in response to serious concerns raised by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Center for Disease Control, ideation and increases among youth, launched several months ago a comprehensive suicide prevention program that includes educational sessions and trainings, text messaging to over 120,000 residents of Miami-Dade to connect them to resources, billboards, media, radio, television, and print. Today, we'll share our stories, tell you what you need to know about this topic, unpack some issues that are important to raise up and discuss, and hopefully provide you with the resources that you need in our community to help those you care about. We hope if we could save one life because you're aware of what you need to know about suicide ideation and risk and prevention strategies, this program will have been completely worth it. Joining me today, and I am so happy to welcome her for this important topic, is Reverend Lisa Lesueur, NAMI Suicide Prevention Program Coordinator, as well as pastor at Coral Gables Congregational Church, and a minister who leads that church's mental health ministry, a really valuable initiative. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you do with NAMI and for the community and for the church. We are so happy to be collaborating with you. And I know that the viewers will want to know, what is the mental health ministry? How did you get involved in this? And what is your story as it relates to this work?
Well, thank you, Susan. Like so many people who become advocates for mental health, my story begins with a lived experience with my previous partner about 15 years ago. She had been having mental health challenges throughout our relationship, but some incidents had happened in her life that made them worse. And so she had to quit working, and she was in therapy and trying to get the help she needed. She was on different medications for it. And, we'd been through a lot of ups and downs. It was a very chaotic existence at that time, trying to deal with what she was going through. But nothing that was happening prepared me for the day that I came home and found her in the living room with a weapon in her hand, wanting to die. And I think that the fact that I wasn't quite sure what to do at that moment, you think you would know, but since suicide really isn't,
how would you?
Exactly. So since suicide really isn't part of our daily conversation, it's not talked about enough. I wasn't sure what to do. I was afraid of what might happen if I called the police or how I proceeded. But I did ultimately call 911. The police came. They had her Baker acted and took her to one of the local emergency rooms, where she got processed to go into a mental health facility, Baker acted. And, how that started to intersect with my faith was I went to church the next day, and, it would have been a very emotional night, going through a lot with her. And instead of staying after church like I normally would and find my friends and chat, I snuck out the back. I didn't want to have to tell anybody what was going on, how chaotic my life was becoming. And it just wasn't a topic that you could openly discuss.
Even though it was your safe space.
Exactly. Well, it was my safe space as a gay person. It was a space that I had come out as a gay person. It was a very affirming place for gay people and very welcoming. But mental illness was that kind of another barrier.
Right.
So even though I could be very open about myself, I couldn't be open about the mental health issue that was occurring in my family. So as I went through seminary, I realized that there were some intersections between what had occurred with the silence that I had met with regards to mental health in the church, and what I had experienced as a gay person who found a community that was radically open and affirming and actually made it possible for me to come out of the closet. And so I wanted to start creating spaces like that for people with mental health challenges. I thought it needed to be part of the conversation, and it just needed to be something that was preached about, prayed about, talked about. And I thought our church spaces were one of those areas where, you already have a community of people. And if 1 in 4 people in the general population have a mental health challenge, well, the people in your pews are going to reflect those statistics. They're just not talking about it.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely.
So, so that began my work in faith communities, and it started with my own church, Coral Gables Congregational, where we built an active mental health ministry, which serves to educate, support, do whatever we can, advocate, do whatever we can to break down that barrier of stigma. A lot of story sharing, just people who didn't realize that other people that they went to church with were experiencing similar things. Having that conversation was so freeing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so that's helped lead me to, I'm working now with the Florida Conference of the United Church of Christ, trying to encourage other churches to go through that process of developing their own mental health ministry.
Has there been wide acceptance from the other, from the association and from the churches?
It's slow. It's hard work. I found that some churches are doing things for mental health, but they just haven't formed that ministry. They haven't taken those extra steps. So with the United Church of Christ, there's what you call a WISE ministry, which is welcome, inclusive, supportive, and engaged for people with mental health challenges. And so each church has an option of going through the steps to becoming a WISE church. And my church did it. We were the 8th church in the United Church of Christ to go through that. And so my work is just kind of encouraging other churches to go take those steps like you would if you're trying to become open and affirming for the LGBTQ community, where you can put that bold statement out there on your website, on banners or whatever, that you're open and affirming. Do the same thing for people with mental health challenges, that this is a safe space for you to be. And I think that that's just transformative. And, it's transformed my life to be able to be open about who I was. And I think that would be transformative for people with mental health challenges, not to have to hide.
Right.
Because it's really a similar experience of being closeted.
Right. Part of the pressure of hiding from anything is that you can't be genuine.
Yes.
And if you can't be genuine, then there's an imbalance and a disconnect.
Yes.
And I think it's brilliant that UCC is doing this and is receptive to it. Because who are generally the first people that one reaches out to if one is faith-based as a person?
Yes.
Reach out to their faith leaders,
yes.
whether it's in their church, the synagogue, their mosque. And there is a little bit of counseling, I understand, and in education to become a rabbi, minister, and imam. But knowing the landscape of the community, knowing how to talk about specific issues, it's all learned.
Yes.
And it needs a commitment. It needs an absolute commitment to do that.
Yes, because what I found in seminary is that there was no official mental health training. You get some pastoral care training, which is kind of, general. But you're not trained how to deal with specific issues with mental health.
And that's for society in general. And I mentioned in the introduction that I found that I was rudderless and without any tools when our son became ill in college, which is ground zero for the onset of mental illness. You think your parenting, your parenting challenges are almost over. You've gone over, the terrible twos up to the transition to middle school and the hormones and adolescence and drinking and proms. And you say, okay, we're good, off to college. And then mental illness strikes. And that's what happened to our family. And there's an intersection in our story with the topic today of suicide, because one of the major events in our son's life before he became ill was that his best friend from high school, a young man who literally lived at my house, finished his education at Purdue, very hard curriculum, and early in post college, ended his life. And Matt, my son's decline into serious mental illness was a year almost to the day that he lost his friend. We'll never know why that happened, but the guilt so consumed him. If I had only called, if I had only visited him that weekend, if so consumed Matt that it triggered a very serious decline. It wasn't the only trigger, but it was a serious trigger. And one of the things that our viewers need to know is we all have a responsibility to have this conversation. The faith community, the academic education, our schools, our workplaces, because it's not well known, but for every suicide that occurs, there are 135 people affected. Family members, colleagues, workplace folks, friends, and the effect could be as serious as what Matthew went through, which was a multi-year, a rapid decline into mental illness and a multi-year recovery. Our son has had a wonderful outcome, but I want to, and we want to honor the lives of those young people who took their own lives because of their hopelessness, their sadness, or reasons that we'll never know, by raising the level of conversation and awareness in all of our communities, and in particular the faith community. And just to level set the conversation, and the why the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Surgeon General, as well as NAMI Miami, have all said we need to do something, is that suicide is now the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 14. The ages are getting lower, and 25 to 34. Following the pandemic, 1 in 3 young adults said they felt sad or hopeless. 30% contemplated suicide. 10% made a plan, and 5% actually did it. And we know that the LGBTQ community is extremely vulnerable.
Yes.
And I know that you've done some work in this regard as our suicide prevention coordinators. So if you could just share your thoughts about that vulnerability, and why is that community so vulnerable, and what should we do about it?
Well, Susan, the statistics you just shared are shocking in and of themselves.
Right.
But for a youth that is LGBTQ, 45% of them have considered suicide last year.
That's almost 1 out of 2.
And it's a rate 4
That
times
is-
higher than their
Wow.
peers.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're transgender or non-binary, the rate is 12 times higher. So, the one thing I want to emphasize here, it's not because LGBTQ people are inherently mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
Sexuality, sexual orientation is not a mental illness. What happens, though, is since they have so much difficulty finding affirming spaces, sometimes they can't even find an affirming space in their own family. They're bullied, they're mistreated, they're treated as other. They're sent to therapy to try to get them to change who they are. So, it's the societal impact about being gay and being, trying to live your life, but it's that stigma of it that, much like mental health in and of itself. Right. So it's something that we have to work to dispel. My concern being, so much of the political environment over the past few years has been targeting LGBT youth, transgender youth, making it more difficult to access safe spaces. And so it's definitely a conversation that we need to have in relationship with suicide prevention.
Absolutely. And I could speak from my own experience. We have 3 members of my extended family, 2 of whom are gay, and 1 is transgender. And they are amazing people, young adults now. And what they went through in trying to define who they were in a family that was not negative about the topic, just didn't talk about it. The challenges, the stresses, when they were able to finally declare who they were and realize that they were in, fortunately for them, an affirming family, their sense of happiness, this sense of productivity, their sense of self, and their blossoming, literally blossoming, were apparent to all of us who were observant of their development from the early teens into young adulthood as they transitioned and defined who they were. And I think we have to love our children and love our friends.
Definitely.
Enough to put their own sense of safe self ahead of any judge. Who are we to judge? But the statistics are very negative. Homeless kids who are thrown out of their family, the place that they should be most safe, when they come out. The LGBT community has over 100%, over 100% more homelessness than any other community.
Yeah.
And so we really need, as parents, as teachers, as community leaders, to make sure that we contribute to their well-being and not to their harm.
Yeah, I think that people who have not been through the experience of living in a closeted situation can't understand how that really cuts you off from so much in life. I mean, when I was living so deeply in the closet, people around me didn't know when I was going on vacation. They didn't know who I was going with. They didn't know how I was spending my time. My relationship with my mother, that had been so affirming and so supportive throughout my life, when the subject of my being gay came up, that just created a huge barrier that she couldn't deal with. And so that cut off access to her. And so that damaged me, because then when the problems occurred in my relationships, when I was dealing with somebody who had severe mental illness, I had no place to go with that.
Right.
So, yes, we need to create affirming spaces for people to be who God meant them to be.
That's why, and you mentioned at the beginning, so insightfully, the alignment between mental health and its secrecy, mental illness, and sexual identity and gender and its secrecy.
Yes.
And I can relate from the mental health standpoint, because when our family went through what we went through with Matthew, we didn't feel like we could talk about it. We couldn't tell our closest friends. They didn't know. And it was only, and this is why I just love NAMI and why I care so much about speaking publicly. It was only until we spoke publicly about it and we let our son know that we are proud of him, that we're there to help him navigate through this life challenge, and that we left our judgment not even at the door. We left it in the next county, that he started recovering. And I talked to so many families who are going through mental health issues with their loved ones, and because it affects behavior, sometimes it affects motivation, it affects affect and personality. Their response is anger rather than understanding. And what I try to do as I talk with them is let them get their anger out, but then in a conversation with me, or sending them to one of our support groups, but remind them how important it is to be that affirming parent for that person going through whatever changes they're going through. And we felt so alone when Matt got sick, that we were closeted in many ways until we decided that we did not want to be closeted. And so I can only imagine, for us, it was a change in the road, a break in the road. It wasn't our life's identity.
Right.
And that's a heavy. I can only imagine how difficult that must have been, and why that creates so much anxiety, PTSD, depression, when you can't have that safe space at home, and then when you feel harassed or challenged at school.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, my daughter is in middle school here in Miami-Dade, and there's a fairly sizable LGBTQ community in that school. A lot of them just questioning them. A lot of them, they're just on that path, but no one's bothering them about it. So they can figure it out. And I think that's what a lot of us do anyway. We figure things out. And to have the space and the grace to be able to do that in a supportive community that kind of affirms you wherever you are on your life's journey you know, that you're still somebody I love, I care for, you haven't changed as a person.
Right.
That's
That's what
just
it's
so
all
amazing.
about.
You may have an illness, you may have a mental illness, but you're still that person
You
that
s-
I love.
Exactly.
And that's just so
Exactly.
important.
I hope that message resonates with family members and friends. And being educated is the other thing. Being
Yes.
affirming, but being educated. Know what you need to know about mental health. Know what you need to know about suicide protection, suicide risk. So and we have a very robust program that you're leading.
Yes.
So tell us about NAMI and QPR and what we're doing in the community to give people those resources to know what they need to know so that they're not caught flat-handed at a time when they may need to step up and be knowledgeable.
Well, we just started the QPR Suicide Prevention Initiative.
Mhm.
QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And it's a 3-step educational program that teaches people how to have the conversation about
Mhm.
suicide. One of the biggest problems with suicide is it again, like mental illness, it's something we don't talk about.
Right.
So we may have a feeling about somebody that they're in a bad place, but we don't talk to them about it because we don't know how. And so what Question, Persuade, Refer does is it gives you some tools for how do you open up that conversation, beginning with, well, what are some of the warning signs that somebody may be thinking about it? And again, you know, the whole thing with preventative, yes, suicide can be prevented in a number of instances when we're aware. But no means would want to have anyone feel bad for thinking
Right.
I should have seen something, because, you know, that's just not always the case.
Right.
So
Thank you for saying that. That is absolutely.
I think it has to be but I think anyone who goes through that, having a loved one or somebody you care about die by suicide, I think that's the first thing you do. What did I miss?
Right.
It's what I went through when I went through that with my partner. What did I miss? There must have been something that should have told me. And maybe if I'd had this class at that point, then maybe I would have seen some signs, seen some things differently. You know, some of the things you're looking for are, what are some of the statements they're making? I mean, it might be a bold, I want to kill myself. It could be something like that. And I think sometimes we brush that kind of statement off because, well, they're frustrated, they're going through a bad time. Yeah, they'll get over it.
Right. They're overreacting. They're emotional. They're
Exactly
trying to get my attention.
And it makes us uncomfortable.
Right.
So we have to move past our discomfort and realize that really could be a warning sign that somebody is seriously contemplating suicide. It may not be that direct. It might be something simpler like, oh, you know, people would be better off without me, or I won't be around much longer anyway. Subtle. It's not direct, but it may still indicate that this person's really having a struggle that we need to pay attention to. It could also be behavior. Has somebody started stockpiling weapons or medicine? Have they recently attempted suicide? Have they are they not taking care of themselves properly like they would normally? Have you noticed them giving away prized possessions? Something like that. It could also be situational. Somebody who's lost their job, lost a relationship, not done well in school, you know, and maybe afraid to go home and tell mom and dad that they flunked out of college. You know, any of these things can be indicators that somebody is thinking about it. And it only takes one, it only takes one indicator. And the majority of people do throw out some hint in the week before that they're thinking about dying of suicide. There are people who just are impulsive, something happens and they, it just happens. But there are, people do tend to contemplate it and think about that and feel that they just don't have any other way. So then the important thing about having the conversation is compassion and empathy, caring, real caring about the person. That can make all the difference in the world, because this person's probably in a place where they think that no one cares. That the world's better off without them. So if you show them something different, If you show them a willingness to be with them in their pain, work with them, try to get them to get help, maybe make the call for them if they're not able to, do the research. And then maybe, depending, of course, on the relationship you have with this person, maybe take them to the appointment.
Right.
Or follow up with them with a phone call. How's everything going? And what the majority of people who get in that place where they consider suicide, or they may even attempt suicide, it's like a one-time thing in their life. So they get through that crisis, they go on, they get the help they need, and they never think about it again.
Interesting.
So that makes it all the much more
important to intervene if you can. And also keeping them safe.
Yes.
Keeping weapons away, keeping medicine cabinets locked.
Exactly.
And you pointed out something when we were talking about this program about the proliferation of really bad stuff on the web.
Yes.
And it behooves parents to really understand what the kids are looking at and what they're seeing in social media and on the web.
Yes.
Because it can glorify something that we know is the biggest tragedy.
That's very true. That's very true. There's so many things out there right now in movies and in TV shows,
right,
where suicide is just part of the plot.
Yeah.
And, for especially a young child, they're not able to process that. I was watching a movie about a young boy who died by suicide. It was called Almost 13. And it was just one of those impulsive things. He got upset with himself for breaking something. And I guess he felt like he had no other choice.
Oh.
And, the devastation that left behind. But and I think it was in this one that there was a therapist who was saying that she's seen children as young as 5 who've attempted suicide.
Oh, that is really frightening.
And so this is a conversation they're not too young to have. And it's better coming from a parent than it is for it's like sex education.
Right.
I'd rather my child get it from me and so that I know what they're getting.
The quality. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the same thing with mental health. I think we need to be explaining to our kids from a young age that you take care of your mental health the same way you do your physical health.
Well, it's interesting because in society, we've all grown up thinking that when somebody goes through a breakup, or you'll get better, you'll get over it, you'll find somebody else.
Yes.
Not how are you feeling? Yes. To assess whether that breakup, which is a trigger for a lot of people,
it is
unfortunately in this tragedy, whether that breakup has really undermined their whole being. So now I know NAMI has some suicide prevention programs coming up on Zoom,
yes,
as well as in person. They're all free of charge, require registration. So if you could share with us the dates. We have one coming up June 16th, I believe.
And the 23rd,
yes. And the 23rd, NAMIMiami.org. Our website lists all of our presentations. We actually have 2 types of presentations at NAMI. QPR, that Lisa leads, as well as Ending the Silence, that Fanny Placencia leads. And Fanny's been on this program before. And Ending the Silence is general mental health awareness, but does have some information about suicide. So both of those are essential for youth, families, corporations, friends, everyone, for us to have that conversation and to have those tools to be able to open up a dialogue, especially when it's needed. And I think we only have a couple minutes left. So NAMIMiami.org, or the phone number is 305-665-2540. We have somebody answering the phone all the time in English and Spanish and French and Portuguese. So please call. Everything NAMI does is free of charge. We're here to educate the community, to help families, to help our school partners, to help community organizations, to help the faith community talk about, learn about, and get the tools and access for mental health. So in closing, just a couple takeaways that you want people to remember from this conversation and your important work in the faith community and in our suicide program.
Well, I just think that the most important thing for people to know is that anyone can make a difference. And none of us know when we might be in a position to help somebody who's struggling with their mental health, who may be considering suicide, or may just need to get hooked up with the right resources for some mental health therapy. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
suicide. Any of us could be in that position. It could be our children, it could be our friends, it could be our coworkers. And, feel empowered to be that person who can at least start the conversation. How are you doing?
Right. And if you don't know how to do that, call NAMI, attend our trainings. We have a robust mental health community. We've had some members from provider organizations and our managing entity agency previously on this program. We'll continue to introduce resources. There are resources. If you don't know where to go, call NAMI Miami. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank the Florida Department of Children and Families and our managing entity, Thriving Minds South Florida, without whose support NAMI Miami would not be able to have this amazing suicide prevention program, which we will continue to hold on Zoom and in person throughout the year.
Yes.
And my takeaway is talk and educate. Educate yourself. What would you do if a loved one had a mental health crisis? What is a mental health crisis? How would you know? Are they just sowing their oats, or are they having onset of some mental health challenge? Learn about this information, just like you learn about how do you know that a mole needs attention on your arm or your shoulder. Learn about these things because it affects everyone. 1 out of 2 people now is living with some type of mental health challenge. Learn. NAMIMiami.org has all the resources about different illnesses, different diagnoses, and then know where to find help. And if you don't, call us and we will help direct you. With that, our next program next week will have we will be talking about schools out and how do we protect and manage our loved ones, our children's mental health over the summer. We'll be having Sally Alley on, the assistant superintendent.
Oh, cool.
Who leads the mental health department of Miami-Dade Public Schools. And we will have a member of our managing entity, which is the safety net for mental health care for Miami-Dade and Monroe. And we'll be talking about what to think about and what to do over the summer. So please tune in, and we hope to have many more opportunities for education and connecting you to resources and to people you should know in the mental health community. And with that, thank you so much, Reverend Lisa. Thank you for all your work. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in today.